It's the 31st of December 2022. Tomorrow is going to be 2023 already. And I really want to wish everybody all the best for 2023. 2022 was a very nice year for me. I didn't work that much, didn't work 7 days a week. And it means that I could spend much more time on socializing with people, my family, my friends, and maybe even more important, could join a sport club again and picked up pencak silat, and I'm quite so happy that it's still working and that I can still do my thing and, you know, put a lot of attention to fighting. And of course, let's start with the very first thing. I love the Kris. You know, the Kris is really my thing. I'm specialized in the blank weapons from Indonesia, and well, this is a very nice East Javanese Madurese Kris. Let me show it to you. So it's a curved Kris, like most Madurese Kris. If you look at them, they're straight Kris, and even the Gonjo is bent, has a curve. It's a very active, very nice Kris. You know, I love them, with a beautiful grip, nice old original mandak, you see, and the grip is really great, you know, made out of ivory. This is old, it's really old. In the last video I told you something about fighting with the Kris, and I also told you that the Kris is not ideal for fighting. So I want to show you a lot of Indonesian weapons, you know. I'm born in Europe, but I'm Javanese. My mother is born in Bandung. My father is born in Yogyakarta, so it's quite simple. I'm 100% Javanese, but born and raised in Europe, like thousands and thousands of people in Holland. We've got our origin in Indonesia, and we feel so very much more Indonesian than Dutch, but that's just what it is. Talking about the Kris, there's a very famous article in the newspaper. Let me show it to you. Then you can see that my grandfather, he came in a fight, and his opponent took 2 Krises and attacked my grandfather. It was on 3 Dutch newspapers and also in 5 Indonesian newspapers. And if you read the article, you can see that he took a lance, he took a pick to fight. Now what's a pick? A pick is actually quite simple. It's a tombak, and it means that even if you've got 2 Kris, if you've got a tombak, then it's quite easy to win the fight, you know. And I'm not talking about sport. Sport is very good, do whatever you like, but if you talk about real combat, you've got other rules. It's live or die. There's no second or third option in it. You live or you die, quite simple. So you've got not much chance to do it. The tombak is such a good weapon, you know why? Because you've got reach. You've got a lot of reach, you know, when you fight, and you can handle it like a normal weapon, you know. You've got something here in the back, you can stop something, you can put it in, and it's a quite good weapon to fight with, you know. Talking about reach, actually there are 3 types of weapons. The category 3, as I call them, is the long reach. Nowadays you can talk about a pistol, gun, or rifle. In the old days, we actually only had, let me show it to you, bow and arrow. And my family stayed in New Guinea until the 60s, from the last century. And the old people over there, they are the real old people the first settlers of Indonesia. They were black, just like the people in Papua New Guinea. And in Indonesia we call them actually the Alifuru. And there are some symbols. Because if you look at the kris, the fighting kris, the real fighting kris, then you see a puppet over there with the feathers who looks a little bit like an Indian. It's not an Indian, it's an Alifuru. Alifuru are the first people who lived in Indonesia. And of course in fighting they use the bow and arrow. And this is already known from Indonesia. And if you start fighting with this, you know, I remember that when I was 12 years old, that when my uncle Hans, he told me exactly what kind of points of the arrow were used for what purpose. Because there are lots of different points, and all of the points have a different use. Well, this one is made for birds. If you shoot birds, then you should use this one. This one is actually to shoot a pig. And you shoot a pig in his neck, right here. So he starts bleeding, that's why it's hollow. And the most horrible ones, like these, are made for humans. So if you shoot a human, you know, it breaks, it stays in, you cannot pull it out, you have to push it through. And so you've got a lot of different arrows with, you've got them for fishing, you've got them for birds, you've got them for all different purposes. There you've got the points of the arrow. So it means that if you are in fight for the third category is distance. And for distance, you can take a human body, yeah? If it is larger than human, then it's got category 3, and it's like a bow and arrow. Category 2 are those that you can reach in man length, like a sword. Category 1 is the ones that you need to get into the armor of your enemy. So you have to get into the reach. So defensive is very important. Let's look at like Mike Tyson. You know, when Mike Tyson was boxing, he was quite small. He beat all his opponents. Quite simple, because he could get into the reach of his opponent, and that was his attack. If you look at great fighters at this moment, like Adesanya, he uses his reach, you know, to stay on distance, and actually he's the one who is managing the fight. Distance is very important. So you've got a lot of weapons who actually come from agriculture. Like this axe, it's a stone edge. It's a stone axe and made out of stone. It looks like metal. It sounds like metal, but it is still stone, you know. So it's actually used as agriculture, you know, if you want to dig a hole in the ground. And you can use it as a weapon. And a very famous old Indonesian weapon has its origin also in agriculture, and that's the Kujang. The Kujang. This is a very old Kujang. It has a square underpart, and a Kujang, it has a small grip at this moment, but it used to have a long grip. Let me explain why. A Kujang has two purposes. The first one is an axe. This you can use as an axe. You can chop, and if the branch breaks down, then you can use this for cutting, you know. So if you've got a leaf, a piece of leaf or whatever, or you need some branches, then you can cut it with this one, like an axe. When it falls down, you want to strip it, then you use this part. And if you look at the modern Kujang, then you can understand actually where it's coming from, agriculture. Those weapons who come from agriculture, just like the Golok, they're used every day. And that's why they're so unbelievably good, because they're made to chop day in, day out. This one is very old. It's coming out of the ground from an excavation, and it's from the Buddha time. It's very, very old. So we're talking about 1300 years old. So I told you, you've got long reach weapons, then you've got the weapons that you get into reach of your enemy, and most Indonesian weapons are actually coming from that part of fighting. Let me start with the Golok. I already talked about the Golok. This is an old Golok, you know, very old Golok. And this Golok, it's made to chop. If you want to chop something, you know, it's very good for chopping. But there's another weapon that looks almost like the Golok. It's the Pedang. And what is the difference between a Golok or a Pedang? That's the sweet spot. The sweet spot is where the balance of the weapon is made. So for instance, the sweet spot here is in the middle, so it's very, very good if you want to fight, you know, you need the skills and for instance, you need to protect, you can turn it around, it goes very easily. It's much more difficult with a Pedang. You know why? The sweet spot is here and not in the middle. So this is made to chop. If you feel it, the balance, it's quite simple, you know. If you've got it in your hand, there's only one thing that you can do with it, and that is attack, and especially on the neck part, you know. So you can use the Golok, for instance, for defense, Pedang for offense, and then you've got both things, defense, offense. And that's the problem with the Kris. The counter attack for a Kris is not good. You can attack, that's correct, but there are no parts to protect yourself when you're being attacked, except for keeping the perfect stance with your leg, get out of the place where the attack is going to be, and counter attack, you know, but you have to do it yourself. It's not the weapon. So let me continue. What is a very good weapon? My personal favorite, if you're looking at fighting, that's the Pedang Lurus. The Pedang Lurus, this is a Pedang Lurus. It's Japanese. This one is made for stabbing. But it has a very, very strange form. It's a bit rounded here. It's sharp on the top from both sides, but if you move up, you can see it's not sharp anymore here. And there you go. I told you already that distance is very important, and the longer your weapon for stabbing, then the better it is in real combat. Again, if you fight with a weapon like this, very important, you know, when you keep the position so you can move back when somebody attacks, and you can go front when you need to attack. This is the best way to stand in a fight. But there you go. If somebody attacks you, you can counter attack with this one, with this position. It comes here, but this is sharp. This is sharp. If you turn it around, then the weapon comes here and it goes off your body. But be careful. This is the opening of your hand. This is the weak point. This is the weak point. And what I've seen with a lot of people, if you train with sticks, it's very good to make the grip bigger, you know, because it's this muscles is what is keeping the weapon. And if you don't keep the weapon good like this, it will fall out of your hands. And if it falls out of your hands, you lost your weapon. And I've seen with a lot of people who just train in the form and not in real fighting, that when you take a stick and you put the stick and you beat it over here, bam, it falls out of their hand. So you have to train, you have to train the muscles to get a very good grip, and then you can use it very good. It's also pusaka, if you check it. It has pamor on it. It is a pusaka. And as said, it is very good in attack. So it has very good offensive features, very good defensive, you know, you can do it like this, you can do it like that, but watch out because this is the weak point when you're holding it. And then you attack, you can slap on the neck like this, you can stab like this, you know. Very good weapon. I like the Pedang lurus. Unfortunately, I don't know any club in Holland who is training with the Pedang lurus, but if you got a weapon like this, that you can chop, you can stab, then you're very dangerous. And it's long, you know, if you compare it with the Golok, you can see you've got a little bit more reach, like this. And distance is very important. Well, of course there are more weapons, like for instance, if you look at Sumatra, there are some great weapons from Sumatra, you know, like karambit. For close combat, that's actually the first class, you know, when you have to get into the defense of your enemy. You've got the karambit, you've got rencong. And what you also see a lot in Holland is that they train with the sai, but sai is actually Chinese. The real trisula, the three-forked weapon of Indonesia, is the trisula. And the trisula, let me show you the trisula. Trisula is used in combat, and it's actually very good defensive. You know why? They use the fork like this. They use the fork to take the weapon out of the hands of your enemy. And it could be a spear, it could be a sword or whatever. But it's a very good defensive weapon, you know, and you can use it like the same technique as you have with a spear, like this. You know, you can attack like this, you can counterattack, you can protect yourself like this, and use this. What? Go back. You see, it's a dangerous weapon. It's a very dangerous weapon to wear. But you can also use it just defensive. You know, keep distance. And if you get a chance to get a stick in between your enemy, you try to disarm him like this. And also the trisula, this is real Japanese, you know. The trisula, the spear and the three-tooth, these are the weapons that are used, you know, to protect people. They protect your collection, they protect your house, the people in your house. So they're not only symbolic as protectors, but also in real you can use them very good, you know. And I showed you the article of my grandfather who's fighting with the tombak. Tombak is dangerous, you know. It's a dangerous weapon, very dangerous weapon. Well, a very symbolic weapon is the tombak petaka, you know. You can use it as a weapon, just like a kris. Kris is also made of metal. You can use it as a weapon, but it's not made as a weapon. If you check it, then you see again 5 spokes. So there we go again, the Nawasanga, the spiritual compass. And actually this is more spiritual. It's recognition to show, okay, you see, I'm on the side of Shiva. And it's more like a flag than a weapon, but you can use it as a weapon, but it's not, it's more spiritual weapon than a real weapon. Distance, category 3, sword, category 2, and there's one weapon that is very famous and you see it in all the temples. That's the Gada, the Gada. This is the Gada. And if you look at all the guards of the temples, the Vapala, you can see that they all use the Gada. And the Gada it's a simple weapon, yeah? You hold it like this, and it's quite simple. If you got in a fight, you put on the head, you know, and be sure that he falls asleep. And like the spear Or the Trisula is the weapon of Shiva. This is the weapon of Vishnu. So there you go. Again, spiritual use. It's a beautiful made weapon, you know. With the Naga over here. Beautiful weapon, beautiful weapon. The Gada. And of course it's heavy, so you have to train a lot before you can use it. It's a heavy weapon. It's a heavy weapon. So the last weapon from category 2, so the length of your body, is the Celurit. And the Celurit, it's East Java. It's an old one, this one, and it's still being used. If you go to YouTube and you Google with Charok, then you'll see that they still use this as a weapon, you know, and fighting with it. Not this is sharp, but this is sharp. So if it comes in the flesh, it puts itself deeper inside of the flesh. Fighting with it is almost the same as when you fight with the sword, or the techniques are almost the same, you know. Defensive, it has no defensive. So you stay in reach of your enemy, you go back, you go front, and you attack, you know. And what you see is that even nowadays, this weapon is very effective, you know. It's an old weapon, and the Celurit. So if you're talking about the first category, when you get really close and you have to get inside the defense of your enemy, it's always dangerous. Eh? You see it with MMA, you see it with boxing. That reach is important. The longer your reach is, the more positive in the fight. The problem with the kris is the handle and the way it is attached. Because if you put the handle off and the passy is round, then it is a ceremonial use. It's actually not made for fighting, because if you stab, it can turn. Well, this is a Badek. Badek is the real knife of Java in the fight. The Badek. And the Badek is almost like it's a shorter version than the Golok. But you have to get inside, so it means that when somebody is attacking you, you have to get out of reach of the weapon, or blocking it short and stab immediately. You have to use your hands if you use this, because it's short range, and in a fight you can use surfer techniques, and that's the good thing, because this will not turn. Use a kris on a sandbag. Probably it will bend. This will not bend. It is hard steel. This is not iron, but steel. And if you want to cut like this, it has a good grip, you know. This will not turn. And like, I love the kris. You know, I've got a lot of kris. The kris is my favorite weapon. But for combat, we're talking about combat right now, the Badek is much better, you know. But this is category 1. Category 1, if you fight with category 1, you have to be a very good fighter. You've got a very, very, very good fighter, because you have to get inside the enemy defense to make it work. Oh yeah, again, for category 3 and category 1, it's quite important. You need training. For category 2, the sword, you don't need training at all. Everybody can handle it, and you can get wounded by, let's say, a beginning fighter. Well, last, I want to show you this weapon. You can call it a Golok or whatever, but if you check very carefully, you can see that the grip is Indonesian. You see? And it has something over here, Chikaru. 1899. This is actually an army knife from the Dutch. Hardened steel. And they completely made a beautiful pattern on the blade. You can see it over here. So then we call it campur, it's mixed. You've got a Western sword made on an Asian Indonesian way from Cikeru, Bandung, where my mother comes from. And it is also hard steel, you know, if you fight with it, you can stab with it. And they call it klewang because the klewang, the army and police still use the klewang at these days, you know, but then they've got the metal grip and protected of the hand. So a great weapon, mixed, European, Indonesian, and it's a great weapon to work with. Okay, well, I showed you some nice weapons, and let me finish this. I really wish everybody the best for the next year. And with the NPFS, we're starting a project about fighting with weapons, and I want to write a book. What weapons are still being used in the pencaksilat world in Holland? I want to invite all the clubs, even the clubs who are no member of the NPFS. I want to get in contact with you. I want to see what you do with the technique, with the Golok. Is it more defensive? Is it offensive? What are the techniques being used, and what Golok do you use for that purpose? When I'm ready with the book, then I'm going to publish it so we can see actually in 2023 what techniques are still used and what weapons are still used in pencaksilat in Holland 70 years after we left our beautiful home country, Indonesia. I love Indonesia. Okay, again, all the best for 2023, and I will be posting more videos about the Indonesian culture.